Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly through a heavy wooden door into a place you've never been before. The hall is dark, lit only by flickering torches. The air smells of roasting meat, honeyed wine, and just a whisper of something earthy, maybe truffles, maybe damp rushes underfoot. You're walking in soft slippers now, trailing behind a nobleman's cloak, past servants carrying silver platters. You pass a roasted swan with feathers artfully reattached to pie that seems to be breathing steam, and a tower of sugared fruits glistening like rubies in the firelight. Welcome to the medieval dining hall of the rich, where food wasn't just sustenance, it was a show. And if you think you're going to survive this feast with your 21st century sensibilities intact, you probably won't. But you'll be deliciously overwhelmed. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The table stretches endlessly. You're not seated at the high table yet, but your place is still richly appointed. A thick linen napkin, maybe stiff with starch, rests beside your wooden trencher. This isn't just dinner, it's a performance, a ritual, an expression of wealth, power, and taste. Let's begin with the basics. The rich in medieval Europe, barons, bishops, kings, ate more than just bread and meat. Their meals were choreographed across courses, each more elaborate than the last. The first dish you're served tonight, likely a broth. But not just any broth. This is a clarified consommé spiced with saffron, a luxury so precious it's counted thread by thread. Floating in the golden liquid is a single quail's egg and a few toasted almond slivers, simple in appearance yet impossible for most to afford. After that, meat. Lots of it. Roasted pheasants spiced with cloves and stuffed with figs. Venison haunches glazed with honey and vinegar. A boar's head jaws bared, apple clenched between its teeth. There is no such thing as light dining here. This is indulgence stacked high. The breads are not your average loaves. Some are baked with milk and eggs for richness. Others are dyed with herbs like parsley or saffron. Your trenchers, those thick, flat rounds of stale bread used as plates, will eventually soak in the sauces and be given to the poor. But yours is so fresh and fine, you're tempted to eat it yourself. There's fruit too. Not raw. Never just raw. Everything is transformed. Apples stewed with cinnamon pears, poached in red wine, dried dates stuffed with almond paste. You sip from a goblet filled with hippocras, a spiced wine sweetened with honey, and herbs passed through linen to filter out the grit. It's strong and warming, but this is only the beginning. Each dish is a symbol, a signal of status. The more exotic the ingredient, the higher your prestige. Peacocks imported from abroad, eels from distant rivers, spices traded overland from the east. Nutmeg, ginger, cinnamon, none of it local, all of it expensive. Your host uses these not for flavor alone, but to display power. To show he commands not only land and men, but the movement of entire trade caravans. You glance down the table. A servant slices into a pastry. It's golden delicate, and suddenly from within, live birds flutter out, flapping into the rafters. Gasps echo. It's not just food. It's entertainment. A reminder that you are in a world where extravagance is the norm, and surprise is the spice of life. And you're just beginning to understand what it meant to be rich in the medieval world. As your trencher fills and refills, and the scent of roasted garlic and rosewater clings to your sleeves, you realize this isn't just a feast. It's an entire philosophy. One where food is ceremony and hunger is never more than a memory. Next, we'll slip into the kitchens, the roaring, sweating heart of this empire of taste where dozens labor to make this moment possible. But for now, get back. Sip your wine. Let the steam from a fig-stuffed goose warm your cheeks. There's more to come. Much more. The hall may be where the feast is displayed, but it's not where the feast is born. Now you're drifting downward through a narrow passageway behind a wooden panel torchlight, guiding your steps as the air grows warmer, thicker, alive with the scent of smoke spices and something just on the edge of burning. You're entering the kitchen of a medieval lord, a world few guests ever saw, but where every bite of roasted swan and sugared almond began its life. This is not your modern idea of a kitchen. There is no tiled floor, no orderly rows of gleaming pots. Instead, it's organized chaos. Massive fireplaces line the walls, each with its own fire roaring. One spits with dripping fat from a spinning spit. Another glows with coals heating a huge copper cauldron. The ceiling is lost in shadow, blackened from years of soot. Smoke clings to every surface, even to your clothes. Here the rich don't cook, but their wealth is measured by the number of people who do it for them. You see a kitchen brigade in motion. Scullions scrape vegetables and scrub trenchers. Boys run with baskets of herbs, powdered spices, and bundles of poultry. Cooks bark orders, wiping sweat from their brows with flour-dusted sleeves. One woman is carefully piping almond paste into delicate shapes. Another is stirring a pot of pottage, testing it with a sliver of bread. At the back, a butcher's block sits heavy and stained. A cook is skinning a rabbit with swift, practiced hands, already discussing how it will be larded, stuffed with herbs and bacon before roasting. A boy plucks feathers from a dead pheasant nearby, tossing them into a basket for later use. Nothing is wasted. Not because of poverty, but because this is how wealth maintains itself, by mastering excess. You glance at a spice chest, locked of course, opened only by the master cook. Inside, tiny cloth bags of saffron cinnamon bark, nutmeg still in its shell. These were once traded over mountains and deserts, arriving by ship and camel, and now they're sprinkled into gravy as casually as salt. But it's not just about the ingredients. It's the timing, the coordination. Meals for the elite must be served hot, fresh, simultaneously. A roasted peacock can't arrive cold. A stuffed pike can't collapse before it's paraded in. So the kitchen runs like a war camp, orders shouted times, tracked fires, tended constantly. Dishes are tested and tasted by assistants, not the noble themselves. Poison was always a fear in rich households, so tasters were crucial. One wrong spice, one overcooked leg of lamb, and a servant might lose their post or worse. And yes, there's also the matter of presentation. A goose won't simply be roasted and tossed on a plate. It will be posed, painted with saffron for color, its beak gilt with gold leaf. A pastry may look like a castle. A fish might be served to resemble a sea monster. The more extravagant the illusion, the greater the prestige. You might be dining on eel, but if it arrives curled to mimic a dragon, the host earns respect. In the corner, sugar is being worked. Not cubes, no, but sculpted forms. Castles, birds, flowers. Sugar is so precious that it's kept under guard, yet here it is turned into edible works of art. A cook dips a brush into a bowl of rosewater, glazing petals made of hardened sugar. Now step back and take it all in. This kitchen is not a single room, but a complex. There's a bakehouse for bread, a pastry room, a boiling house for preparing meats, a larder, a buttery for drinks, a scullery, a spicery. The sheer infrastructure behind every rich meal is staggering. It's why even minor nobles needed dozens of staff just to maintain the illusion of effortless abundance. And yet, this world hums with pride. These are craftsmen, artists, strategists of the stomach. The master cook is respected nearly as much as the steward, and sometimes more. A nobleman may flex his wealth through land and tapestries, but his true power is proven at the table. And the kitchen is where that power is built, one goose at a time. You linger a moment longer, the heat of the fires brushing your face, the scent of clove and roast fat swirling around you. You imagine the next dish being plated, a tart of cheese and eggs flecked with herbs and sugar, served with slices of candied orange. You're starting to realize that for the rich, eating wasn't about hunger. It was about storytelling. And now that you've seen how the meal is made, we'll next rise to the other side of the social performance, the great dining rituals themselves. How nobles sat, what they said, and how every movement at the table spoke volumes before a single bite was even taken. But first, let the flavor of saffron and smoke linger just a little longer on your tongue. You're back in the hall now. But something's shifted. You're no longer a curious onlooker with soot on your sleeves. You've bathed. Your clothes smell of crushed lavender and soft wool. You're wearing something elegant, simple, but fine. A tunic of blue or a gown of muted gold. You're clean, presentable, ready to take your seat at a noble's table. And here is where the real performance begins. Because in the medieval world, for the wealthy, eating was never just about food. It was a deeply choreographed affair, an act of etiquette, hierarchy, symbolism. Every motion had meaning. Every gesture reflected your status. And if you got it wrong, you might not eat at all. First, there's the seating. You don't choose where to sit. That decision is made by rank, your family name, your wealth, your connection to the host. The most honored guests sit at the high table, usually on a raised platform called a dais, so they can be seen by everyone else in the hall. The lower your status, the farther down the table you go until you're nearly in the shadows by the wall. At the high table, plates aren't wooden. They're pewter silver or even gold. Your cup might be polished horn or chased with enamel. The napkin folded beside your trencher is spotless, and a servant is already pouring wine from a tall ewer into your goblet. Not too much, not too little. Everything is precisely judged. Then comes the hand washing. This isn't optional. A basin is brought before you. A servant pours rose water or lavender-scented water over your hands, which you dry with a linen cloth. It's cleansing, yes, but it's also symbolic. Clean hands, clean soul. And besides, you'll be using your fingers to eat more than your utensils. Forks, if they exist at all, are rare and suspicious, sometimes even considered effeminate. The rich ate mostly with knife, spoon, and hand. Now the servers arrive. They don't just dump food in front of you. No, it's a procession. A service à la française, as later historians would call it, where multiple dishes are brought out at once, arranged with care and drama. You're expected to choose what you want, but you must do it gracefully. Too much reaching, and you'll look greedy. Too much fussing, and you'll seem ungrateful. You begin with a slice of cold meat, maybe veal cured and spiced with coriander. Then a spoonful of almond milk pottage, silky and pale with soft carrots and rice. Someone passes a platter of fritters, golden and crisp, dusted with sugar and cinnamon. You take one, not two. One. The host may lift his goblet in toast. You rise to your feet. A murmur of Latin or a short blessing may follow. Or perhaps a jest. This is still a time of laughter, of bawdy jokes, of music played between courses. A minstrel might wander past the tables singing a ballad, plucking a lute, or recounting tales of far-off lands. Sometimes acrobats perform between courses. Other times, the food is the performance pies that bleed colored syrup when cut open, or sugar sculptures that seem to move in the firelight. But still, there are rules. Don't speak with your mouth full. Don't put elbows on the table. Don't wipe your hands on your tunic. Don't insult the cook. And above all, respect the food. Every bite you take is a symbol of your refinement, your awareness, your ability to belong at this table. There is no modern dinner party that quite compares to this. Here, dining is a ritual of class, an echo of courtly love, chivalry, and power. To eat without care is to show your ignorance. To eat with grace is to show that you understand your place in the world. You glance down the table and watch a noblewoman delicately split a spiced pear with the tip of her knife. She dips it into a sauce of honey and vinegar. Her sleeve doesn't touch the table. She chews in silence, then dabs her lips with her napkin. It's beautiful, controlled, and utterly exhausting. A few seats down, a young man accidentally sloshes his wine while trying to serve himself a pottage. He mutters an apology. The others pretend not to notice, but they do. His face colors. He straightens his shoulders. And you realize this is a test. Every meal is. Then comes grace after meals, a prayer, a bow, a signaling of completion. The bread trencher soaked with sauce is collected. It may be taken to the poor or to the servants. The table is wiped, the napkins refolded. The guests rise slowly. Some retire for conversation. Others drift into song or stroll beneath the moonlight in the garden beyond the hall. And you're left with the heady memory of nutmeg and candlelight, of warm wine and whispered rules. You feel full, but also aware. You've just seen how food is used not only to nourish, but to divide, to elevate, to reinforce invisible lines between classes and courtiers. Next, we'll slip away from the table and explore where this food came from, not the kitchen, but the land, the gardens, and the trade routes that fed the rich in a world of scarcity. But for now, rest in the glow of the feast. Let the cinnamon linger. Let the rules settle into your bones. You passed the test tonight. Barely. The feast has faded now. The hall is quiet. Candles have guttered down into pools of wax, and the laughter of the high table is just a memory echoing faintly against the vaulted stone. You step away from the warmth of the hearth and into the corridors beyond, following not the guests, but the roots of the meal itself back to its very origins. Because rich people in medieval times didn't just eat differently. They grew, hunted, shipped, and bought food differently too. And their wealth was reflected not only in what they put on the table, but in how they acquired it. You begin in the gardens, not vegetable patches like a peasant might tend. These are pleasure gardens carefully planned and manicured, filled with herbs, fruits, and rare imports. You walk past lavender and thyme, not just grown for scent, but used in cooking and medicine. There's borage here to float prettily in wine, sage for stuffing goose, and rosemary woven into braids and dipped into stews. Closer to the walls, vines curl along trellises heavy with grapes trained to grow in the angled sunlight. A gardener, likely a servant of some rank, is on his knees speaking softly to a pear tree grafted to bloom early. You reach out and touch a fig not quite ripe yet, but heavy with promise. But these gardens can't feed an entire noble household. For that, we must look farther afield into the vast estates that stretch beyond the manor. The land is everything. The noble class didn't till the fields, of course. But their wealth was directly tied to the labor of peasants who worked the soil under obligations of feudal service. These peasants grew wheat, barley, and oats primarily for themselves and for rent, but the best harvests were collected by the Lord. From this came the fine white bread the nobility ate, known as manchet, made from the innermost part of the wheat grain. It was refined, sieved, and pounded smooth. The coarser, darker loaves, those were for the poor. From the estate also came the livestock, cattle, pigs, chickens, geese, but not raised the way we think of it. Animals roamed in open meadows, fattened slowly. Rich households sometimes had their own dovecotes, a symbol of extreme status, where plump pigeons were raised specifically for dining. But some foods came from even farther, much farther. Step with me into the shadows of the storeroom, long shelves stacked with imports. There are sacks of rice, dried lemons from the Mediterranean, almonds from Spain, and black pepper glittering darkly like precious stones. All of it was brought at great cost across seas and deserts by caravan and ship. The spice trade alone touched nearly every continent, with noble kitchens at the receiving end of a supply chain that stretched from India to Alexandria, through Venice and into the manor hall. You pick up a tiny pouch. It smells like cloves, sharp, heady, and unmistakably foreign. This single handful could cost more than a servant's yearly wage. And yet here it is, used to flavor lamb or preserve pears, dusted lightly over rice or folded into custard. For the rich, these foods were more than delicious. They were political. To serve saffron was to signal that your family had connections to the right merchants. To pour wine sweetened with imported sugar was to display wealth that had crossed oceans. And speaking of wine, let's not forget, drink. The rich rarely drank water. It was considered unsafe and unrefined. Instead, they drank ale, wine, mead, sometimes diluted, sometimes spiced. Wine came from their own vineyards if they were lucky, or was brought in from Gascony, the Rhine, or even farther afield. The best wines were aged, clear, and free from sediment. The poorer sorts, cloudy, sour, and almost medicinal. There were luxury foodstuffs that no garden or field could produce. Eels and lampreys harvested from rivers. Salted fish from the coast, carried inland on wagons. Truffles dug from forests by pigs. Honey collected in thick, dark combs from wooden hives. All of it taxed. All of it tracked. All of it prized. And behind every shipment was a network, a web of relationships and obligations, tolls paid at gates, letters of permission, trades made behind closed doors. In the end, what the rich ate was not just earthly, it was also crafted by empire, carried on the backs of traders and peasants alike, blessed by geography, and hoarded by those who knew how to turn grain and grape into gold. As you step out of the storeroom, you can almost hear the clink of coins, the shout of a merchant, the rustle of sacks being offloaded from a barge at dawn. You realize that what appears on a noble table is only the final act of a long and visible drama, one written in fields, cellars, ports, and parchment ledgers. Next, we'll return to the feast itself, but this time through the lens of ceremony. We'll explore the great banquets, the coronations, the weddings, the religious feasts, where nobles showed off not only what they had, but who they were. But before that, take a deep breath. Smell the spice in the air. Picture the vineyard, the orchard, the ships at harbor. Everything on your plate started here. You're back inside now, but not just for any meal. Tonight is different. There's a hum in the air, a sense of grandeur that goes beyond even the usual luxury. Tapestries have been freshly hung. Candles burn at every pillar. Silver gleams along the walls. This is no ordinary dinner. This is a feast day, a banquet, a celebration worthy of the highest in the land. Maybe it's a wedding, a coronation, or the feast of a saint. Whatever the cause tonight, the rich will eat not just to satisfy hunger or show status, but to stage their identity. And you're here for every gilded detail. The preparation has taken weeks, sometimes months. Entire forests were scoured for game, rivers netted for fish, farms pressed for their finest vegetables and fowl. Cooks were summoned from afar. Artisans tasked with carving elaborate sugar sculptures. Pages rehearsed how to carry trays of peacock without letting the feathers droop. Even the musicians practiced their songs, because sound matters just as much as taste. You stand at the edge of the grand hall watching the guests arrive. Everyone is dressed to impress. Velvet, ermine, brocade, shoes with curled toes, hair coiled or hidden beneath hoods, rings on fingers sometimes over gloves. No one arrives hungry, they arrive ready to be seen. The tables are longer than usual. Many are arranged in a U-shape with the most important seat, usually the Lord Bishop or King, at the center of the head table so that all may see and be seen in return. A canopy of honor might hang above them, embroidered with heraldic symbols. This isn't just a place to sit, it's a throne of appetite. Then comes the first course. It's lavish but not overpowering. Cold meats, jellied fish, elaborate pies. One dish might be molded to resemble a swan, though it's made entirely of almond paste. You see gilded cherries stacked into a pyramid. Marzipan knights posed mid-duel on a sugared battlefield. A pie is cut, and to the delight of the crowd, live sparrows flutter out, just as described in the old song. Everything is meant to amaze. And then the entremets, those in-between dishes that are less about food and more about spectacle. A roasted boar carried in on a silver litter. A roast peacock, its plumage carefully preserved, reattached after cooking its beak painted gold. One might even see mechanical marvels like a pastry castle that rotates on a spit or a pie that plays a tune when cut. You glance around. Guests are laughing, gossiping, whispering critiques of the presentation. But make no mistake, every raised eyebrow, every toast, every bite taken or ignored carries meaning. Feasts are political theater, and every choice is noticed. If a lord favors the fish dish over the beef, is he signaling something to the fishermen? If he drinks only wine and not ale, is it a subtle jab at local brewers? Servants bustle with precision. Some pour wine spiced with cinnamon and ginger, while others offer sauces thick with raisins, vinegar, and pepper. Trenchers are removed and replaced courses refreshed. The meal is rhythmic like a dance choreographed to perfection. And then, amid it all, ritual. Perhaps the feast falls on Easter, so dishes are arranged in symbolic groupings, lamb for sacrifice, eggs for resurrection. Or it's a royal wedding where two swans glide across the table on wheels bound together with golden ribbon. Or it's Christmas, and a Yule boar is presented with a sprig of rosemary in its mouth, ushered in by minstrels and chants. For the rich, these banquets aren't just about indulgence. They're about continuity, about tying themselves to tradition, religion, and lineage. The food isn't just delicious, it's storytelling. A well-composed feast says, I am cultured, I am powerful, and I know how to honor the past while feeding the future. You take a small bite of spiced custard and feel the heat of ginger bloom on your tongue. Across the room, a lord is demonstrating his generosity by sharing a slice of his favorite tart with a visiting ambassador. Every gesture is recorded silently by the crowd alliances, being reinforced with every spoonful of almond cream. By the end of the meal, everyone is full, but that's never the point. The true satisfaction comes from having participated in something rare, orchestrated, and deeply symbolic. As servants begin to clear the tables and wine is poured one last time, The hall hums with post-feast warmth. Music softens. The great doors open to the cool night air. Tomorrow everyone will talk about the sugared lions, the peacock's glaze, the foreign cheeses that made their way here from Genoa. And they'll remember who provided it all. You. Or at least the noble who played the host so flawlessly. Next, we'll drift into the quiet rhythms of daily dining, not just feasts and festivals, but how the rich ate on an ordinary Tuesday when the world wasn't watching, and the food was more function than theater. But tonight, let the scent of clove and roasted pear stay with you a little longer. Let the laughter of courtiers echo faintly behind your eyes. You've survived the banquet, and you've done it with grace. The tapestries have been rolled back. The canopy has been stored. The musicians have taken their leave. Last night's banquet is already legend murmured about in corridors and scribbled into letters. But this morning, it's just another day. The castle breathes differently now, quieter, slower, wrapped in the subtle routines that make up a noble's ordinary life. And yes, even the rich have ordinary days. But that doesn't mean their meals are anything like yours. You wake in a large chamber with glazed windows, luxury in itself. The hearth is cold. A servant has brought water in a pewter basin for washing. And already you can smell something faint in the corridor, spiced oatcakes maybe, or a warmed ale for breakfast. Because for the wealthy, breakfast wasn't a grand event. It was more like a medicinal ritual, a way to prepare the stomach. Medieval doctors warned against eating too early or too heavily. Food needed to align with the body's humors. So the morning meal, when taken at all, was light and intentional. You might begin with a slice of manchette bread, soft, white, refined. Perhaps you dip it in warmed wine, sweetened with honey and infused with a little rosemary. Or maybe a soft-boiled egg served in a tiny ceramic cup. Rich households sometimes had custard in the morning, or buttered milk curd with herbs. If you're feeling indulgent, a few slices of dried fig or quince jelly are laid out. You eat quietly. There is no crowd. Only a steward or perhaps a maid quietly laying another tray. The noble life isn't all feasting, it's measured. And the rituals of restraint are just as important as excess. Midday comes quickly, and that's when the real eating begins. The main meal of the day is usually around 10 or 11 a.m. early by modern standards, but logical when you remember there's no electric lighting. The day's work meetings or inspections take place in the morning, and meals are built around the sun. Now the dining room is in use, but nothing as extravagant as last night. There are fewer courses, perhaps 2 or 3 instead of 6 or 7. Still, the quality is high. The first course might be something familiar, a broth thickened with barley flavored with beef bones and a bit of sage. Alongside it comes a meat pie, possibly of pigeon or rabbit, tucked into a golden crust spiced with nutmeg and black pepper. If it's a Friday or a holy day, you'll have fish instead, poached trout or eel stewed with fennel. The meal is balanced according to humoral theory. If it's cold outside, you'll be served warming foods, onions, leeks, roasted meats. If it's summer cooler fare like goat's cheese salad herbs or cold fowl. And of course, spices are present. Not as flamboyant as last night, but subtle, a pinch of saffron in a tart or cinnamon in the apple fritters. The rich didn't use spices because they had to. They used them because they could. A dish without spice in a noble household, practically unheard of. There's also alewife's bread, still warm to wipe your trencher. Maybe even a little butter, though, that was sometimes seen as peasant fare. It crept into wealthier tables in colder months. Wine flows lightly, not too much. And always watered down. Intoxication in the middle of the day is frowned upon. Now comes dessert, though it's not always called that. A few candied nuts, spiced wafers, a wafer-thin slice of cheese with honey drizzled on top. Even here, the food is more than just an afterthought. It reflects digestive theory, thought to aid the stomach in processing the meal. By now, servants are clearing. You lean back. And it's striking how normal it all feels until you remember that nothing here is normal. Not the bread, not the wine, not the silver goblet in your hand. Even in quiet moments, the rich eat like rulers. Every bite is clean, controlled, and curated. Supper will come later before sundown. But it will be lighter, more casual. A bowl of pottage, a few small pasties, maybe some stewed fruit with cream. This daily rhythm doesn't change much across noble households. What changes is the wealth behind it, how many servants attend, how rare the spices, how clean the linens. And now, with your fingers wiped, your goblet empty, and the table cleared, you rise not stuffed, not starving, but precisely satisfied. The rich didn't gorge at every opportunity. That would be vulgar. Instead, they savored meals like they savored power gracefully. Next, we'll wander into the realm of health and diet. The fascinating, sometimes baffling beliefs nobles held about what food did to the body and how it had to be balanced. But for now, feel that warmth in your belly, the softness of fresh bread, the tingle of clove still on your tongue. It's only midday, but already you've eaten like royalty. You're resting now somewhere between the second meal of the day and the slow drift of evening. The light slants across the floor in long amber stripes, and while your body relaxes, your mind begins to wander, just as a medieval noble's might, toward your health. Because in this world, food is not just for sustenance or pleasure. It is medicine, philosophy, and science all wrapped into every bite. To understand what the rich believed about eating, you must step into the world of humoral theory, the dominant model of health inherited from the ancient Greeks, particularly Galen, and accepted almost without question well into the Renaissance. According to this system, the body was composed of 4 humors: blood phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Health depended on keeping these in balance, and every food you consumed could shift the scales. You didn't just eat chicken. You ate something that was warm and moist in quality, suited for certain temperaments. You didn't avoid cucumbers because you disliked them, but because they were cold and wet and could cause imbalance if eaten on a chilly morning. It sounds strange to you now, but to the wealthy in medieval times it was taken very seriously. You picture a noblewoman choosing her meal. She's been feeling sluggish, perhaps too much phlegm. The physician recommends something warming like leeks in broth or a tart of spiced lamb. No cold fruits, no raw vegetables. Those could upset her internal balance. A nobleman recovering from fever might be served chicken stewed with rice and almond milk, both considered gentle and temperate. Or maybe barley water to cool the blood, settle the stomach, and restore the body's equilibrium. Menus weren't written around flavor alone. They were crafted to move the body toward ideal alignment. Foods were ranked by their degree of heat, cold, moisture, and dryness. And every good cook in a noble household was expected to know these properties, if not by study, then by tradition. You imagine the kitchen staff consulting a physician. Yes, that happened. Especially in the homes of the truly wealthy. The cook would ask what the Lord needed that week: more moisture, less heat, spiced wine to warm the liver, a salad of violets and herbs to soothe the temper. This attention to health extended even to the order of courses. Meals often began with light, dry foods to open the appetite. Think thin wafers, apples, or pickled ginger. Then came the heavier meats and stews designed to sustain and fortify. Finally, the meal ended with digestives, things like aniseed, candied fennel, or comfits, sugar-coated spices to help close the stomach. Even color mattered. Bright foods, golden red, vibrant, were considered more healthful than pale or murky ones. Saffron wasn't just decorative, it was energizing. Parsley wasn't only garnish, it freshened the blood. Some nobles even kept food journals. Well, not journals as you think of them, but records of what they ate and how they felt. A bad night's sleep, too much cold food. A headache, likely too much wine or wine that was too acidic. Physicians might recommend foods opposite in temperament to restore balance, cooling cucumbers after a hot summer ride or peppery dishes after cold, damp hunting days. And if you were truly wealthy, you might consult a dietary manual, a handwritten book passed down or commissioned full of advice on what to eat during different seasons, ages, or emotional states. These were prized possessions, equal parts cookbook, medical guide, and social instruction. All of this helped reinforce a powerful idea: the rich didn't just eat better food, they ate smarter. Or so they believed. Their diets reflected not just access to ingredients, but to education, physicians, and an entire cultural system that placed their bodies at the center of a cosmological dance. They weren't just feeding themselves, they were maintaining a finely tuned instrument, a vessel of divine order. You lean back now, your head sinking into the soft linen of your imagined cushion, and you wonder how different things really are. Today you talk of calories and carbs. Then it was humors and temperaments. But the urge is the same, to believe that what you eat can heal you. That food is power. Next, we'll slip back into the kitchen, not the chaos of preparation, but the quiet rituals of preservation. Because before the feast, before the fire, before the knife, there was always the question, how do we keep it from spoiling? But for now, rest with the scent of fennel on your breath and the lingering memory of warm almond milk sliding gently down your throat. The body, after all, is sacred, and tonight you've fed it well. You're standing in a dim stone cellar now, the air cool and faintly sour with age. A single torch crackles behind you, casting flickers of light across rows of jars, crocks, sacks, and hanging bundles. Welcome to the hidden heart of noble cuisine, where food is not plated or spiced, but preserved. Because if you're rich in medieval times, having food in winter isn't just survival. It's a sign of status, forethought, and power. You walk slowly through the rows of shelves, each one a small monument to patience and preservation. There are jars of fruit plums and cherries steeped in honey or syrup. Their color faded, but their sweetness intact. Honey, the medieval miracle, was a preservative long before sugar became commonplace. Peaches float like ghosts in golden syrup. You lift a lid and inhale something like thyme itself. In another corner, salted meat hangs from iron hooks. Sides of bacon, haunches of venison, strings of sausage made with fat herbs and liver. Salt is everywhere in here. It lines the casks, crusts the barrels, and even cakes the floor in fine white dust. Without refrigeration, salt was the rich man's guarantee. But not just any salt, sea salt for the wealthy, with finer crystals and cleaner taste. The poor often used inferior mineral salt or none at all. A servant walks by with a basket. Inside, smoked fish wrapped in linen. Another ancient method, using fire and thyme to dry and flavor what would otherwise rot. You watch as she gently lays it near the hearth to finish curing. It's herring today, but could easily be eel trout or salmon, anything caught in abundance during feast days and saved for leaner times. Then further back, a set of wooden barrels. You lift the lid of one and catch a noseful of sauerkraut, sharp and alive. Fermented cabbage isn't just for peasants, it's considered cleansing. In another barrel, pickled onions floating like pearls in brine. And over there, vinegar eggs, whole yolks suspended in an acidic bath to keep them fresh and tangy. Not tasty by modern standards perhaps, but vital when hens stop laying in winter. Against the wall shelves of hard cheese wrapped in beeswax, the fat sealed tight to protect from mold. Some have been aging for months, even years. Each wheel is marked with a stamp, the family crest, or a date, or the initials of the cheesemaker. These wheels are wealth. They can be eaten, gifted, traded. And tucked among the preserves are spices stored in tiny chests like treasure. Mace, nutmeg, cloves, black pepper. Each one is carefully kept in linen pouches or sealed jars, dry and guarded against moisture. A rich household might have an entire cupboard of them locked and overseen by a spicerer. Yes, that was a real role. To own spices was to own a slice of the world. But preservation didn't stop at meat and fruit. Bread could be dried into hard rusks for travel, or saved for grinding into crumbs. Butter could be clarified and sealed into crocks. Even wine and ale were preserved, aged in barrels, sometimes sealed with pitch or wax to prevent souring. You begin to realize in this world food is memory. A cherry in syrup carries the heat of July into the frost of January. A salted leg of lamb remembers a springtime slaughter. And every preserved morsel is a signal we have enough. We thought ahead. We will not starve. But here's the twist. The rich didn't preserve food because they had to. They did it to showcase control, to turn time itself into an ingredient. A well-stocked larder was like a full treasury. It spoke of access, foresight, dominion, and sometimes preservation became performance. A noble might serve preserved pears in December, dusted with ginger and gold leaf, to stun their guests with a reminder, I can give you summer in the dead of winter. Or they might bring out smoked goose from a hunt 3 months past, paired with spiced wine that had aged for a decade. It wasn't just dinner, it was time travel. You run your fingers over the cool surface of a beeswax-sealed pot. Inside, perhaps, are quinces cooked into a paste so dense they can last through Lent. You feel a strange reverence standing among these shadows. This isn't just food. It's foresight, tradition, wealth, survival. Next, we'll rise from the cellar and step into the kitchens themselves, vast, hot, dangerous places where status was carved with knives and hierarchy was enforced with fire. But for now, breathe in the stillness of this place. Let the scent of nutmeg and salt cling to your clothes. Because you've just wandered through the memory vault of the medieval elite, their quiet promise to themselves that hunger would never touch their walls. You emerge from the cool hush of the cellar and step into a wave of heat. The kitchen greets you like a living beast, roaring, hissing, steaming. Smoke curls toward the ceiling where soot-darkened beams sag under the weight of decades. This is no cozy hearth. This is an engine of survival, of spectacle, of control. The medieval noble kitchen is vast, chaotic, and wildly hierarchical. It is not run by one cook, but by a small army of specialists, each with their own duties, titles, and corners of authority. And here wealth is made visible not through velvet robes or golden goblets, but through staff. You begin with the head cook, or Meester Koch, a master of timing, temperature, and tone. He doesn't just stir pots, he commands people. He reads the tastes of the lord and lady, interprets instructions from the steward, and oversees the rotating cast of undercooks, turnspits, bakers, and pastry makers. Beneath him, each person knows their task, and woe to the one who forgets it. There's the saucier bent over a row of pans, coaxing rich velvets from marrow and wine. The pastry cook elbows deep in flour, folding crust around pigeon and prunes. The roaster red-faced managing spits as they rotate huge haunches of meat over open flame. Every roll matters, and each dish is a step in a precisely timed ballet. You glance to the far wall. There's the scullery where water sloshes in barrels and junior boys scrub everything until their fingers wrinkle. Wooden trenchers, knives, pots. The scullery is punishment for the unskilled. It's damp. It's smoky. It's loud. And no one wants to stay there long. Outside, another team works in the buttery, a storage area for wine, ale, and drink. Not to be confused with the pantry, where bread and dry goods are kept under lock and key. Each has a keeper, a steward, someone trusted to guard the Lord's stores. Theft is rare because it's dealt with severely. You watch a turnspit boy, barely 12, shoved into place beneath the spit wheel. He turns it by hand hour after hour, ensuring the meat cooks evenly. He's covered in sweat and soot. And yet this boy is crucial, because a roast that burns or cooks unevenly, that's shame. That's waste. That's a bad reflection on the entire household. The smells are intoxicating. A venison haunch crusted in mustard seeds, leeks stewing in bone broth, apples bubbling with cinnamon in an iron pot. Something sweet wafts by, spiced custards maybe, or poached pears set to chill for the evening table. And all of this industrial heat, this clatter and command is happening in a world with no thermometers, no timers, no clocks, just experience, just instinct. You understand now that cooking for the rich is not just labor, it is craft. And the higher the household, the more theatrical the expectations. Want to impress a foreign dignitary? Better make that pastry castle stand straight. Hosting a bishop. Don't let the eel stew separate. Royalty visiting. Every item must reflect your house's flavor and reputation. And it's not just food being created here. It's politics, relationships, loyalty. The cook who gets it right might earn a gold coin. The one who ruins the Lord's favorite dish might be dismissed. Or worse, publicly shamed. You duck into a side room where the herb mistress is at work. Not every noble household had one, but the wealthiest did. She's drying bay leaves, mixing salt with sage, pressing violets into sugar. She doesn't just know flavors. She knows temperaments. How to ease a cough. How to calm indigestion. How to make a syrup that helps the Lord sleep through winter storms. The kitchen is both sensory and sacred. Everything that happens here affects what happens at the high table. From the color of a sauce to the crispness of a duck's skin, each detail can lift a meal or sour it. And yet most of this world remains invisible to the diners. They don't see the boy at the spit, the woman grinding almonds for cream, the man carrying firewood up and down the stairs until his back buckles. But you do, you see the engine that turns wealth into flavor. And you understand that in a noble house, the kitchen isn't just a room. It's a stage behind the curtain, a theater where ambition sweats beside artistry. Next, we'll follow the food from this very room to the dining hall, once more this time through the hands of the servants who serve it. We'll look at etiquette protocol and the quiet language of plates and platters. But before we leave, take one last look at the firelight, dancing on copper pans, at the ladle held steady over simmering stew, at the dough shaped by quiet fingers. Because tonight, when the nobles eat in golden silence, it's this chaos, this creation, you'll remember most. Now the food is ready. The sauces have been thickened, the meats carved, the sweets dusted with sugar, and arranged just so. But none of it reaches the noble table by magic. There's an entire ballet of service that must unfold, next silent, careful, and rich with meaning. You follow the line of servants out of the kitchen, each one balancing a platter, a jug, or a folded cloth with the precision of a ritual. They pass through corridors and arches, up stone steps worn smooth from generations of this exact march. Their feet move quietly, their faces composed. Because in a noble household, how the food is served can matter as much as what is served. The procession enters the great hall where candles are already lit, and the linen laid out crisp and clean. The room smells of rosemary and smoke, with tapestries muting the chill of the stone walls. At the high table sit the lord and lady, perhaps their children, and distinguished guests. Beneath them lesser nobles and retainers, and below still at separate tables or even benches, the household staff who rank just high enough to dine within view. A hush settles as the servers arrive. They don't speak unless spoken to. Each step, each bow, each motion of pouring or presenting is governed by rules, some written, most passed down by memory and repetition. At the Lord's side stands the carver, a highly trusted role, often of noble birth himself. He's trained not just in slicing meat, but in reading the mood of the table. With a long curved knife, he portions a goose with fluid grace, ensuring the finest cuts go to the most important guests. Each movement is part of a centuries-old etiquette designed to showcase generosity, hierarchy, and refinement. Nearby, a cupbearer holds a goblet aloft. Before offering wine, he tastes it himself, both to show honor and to guard against poison. The cup is passed only when the table's host nods. No one drinks until the Lord drinks first. Another servant brings a lavabo, a basin for hand-washing. Warm water is poured over noble fingers, and linen cloths are offered. Clean hands, clean conscience, clean appetite. Even in a time with limited sanitation, this ceremony carried symbolic weight. You look across the hall and spot a group of pages, young boys in training. They observe everything. Today they carry trenchers and retrieve empty platters. Tomorrow they may serve the wine. One day, if they rise high enough, they might sit at the table themselves. But for now, they learn the rhythm of noble dining. The right posture, the right bow, the right moment to step forward or retreat. And among all this silence and precision, there is speaking, but only in glances, gestures, or quiet murmurs. A lord asking for more sauce does not shout. He raises an eyebrow. A lady craving more spiced pear does not demand she waits for a servant to notice her plate. Everything here is subtle performance. Not every noble ate in a great hall each night, of course. In smaller households or more private moments, they dined in chambers where the rituals were relaxed, though still refined. Yet even then, the order of service remained cloth-laid. First trenchers set salt placed near the head of the table, always near the most honored guest. And speaking of salt, its position said much. Those who sat above the salt were of higher status, those below lesser. It was a quiet, granular boundary of power. As the meal continues, the servers move like shadows. A new dish arrives, perhaps a pike, carefully boned, swimming in a green herb sauce. Next, a simple custard perfumed with rosewater. No dish lingers too long. Cold food is an insult. The noble palate must always be honored. When something spills, it's cleaned before anyone can blink. When a plate is empty, it's swept away in silence. You start to notice how the serving hierarchy mirrors the social one. The steward watches all. The seneschal might oversee the entire event. And every servant, regardless of rank, knows their role like an actor on stage. To eat in this world is to engage in a dance of dominance, grace, and trust. You begin to understand how much pressure rests not just on the cook's shoulders, but on those who carry serve and present. One wrong dish to the wrong person could cause insult. One spoiled wine could embarrass a host. But when done well, the service disappears, and the diners are left with only the illusion that it all came effortlessly. Next, we'll sit at that table ourselves, not as an observer, but as a guest, so we can experience the etiquette, expectations, and silent tests woven into the very act of eating among the elite. But for now, take one last look at the figures gliding through candlelight, their hands steady, their faces calm. Because to serve the rich well is to be invisible, indispensable, and perfect. Tonight, you're not just watching, you're seated at the table. You ease onto the cushioned bench, careful not to let your robe wrinkle or spill into your neighbor's space. The table stretches wide before you, covered in white linen, heavy plates, and polished goblets. You glance around, subtly mimicking the gestures of others. Because here, the food is only part of the performance. The rest is in how you behave. Welcome to the rich person's dining experience in medieval times. It's not just about indulgence, it's about control, etiquette, and status. Every movement of your hands, every bite you take speaks volumes. In front of you is a trencher, a thick slab of bread, lightly stale, used as your plate. It absorbs juices, catches crumbs, and when you've finished your meal, it may be given to the poor or eaten by dogs, unless, of course, you're especially hungry. Either way, it's both practical and symbolic. Even for the rich, nothing should go to waste visibly. Beside you is a knife, but no fork. Forks exist, but they are still controversial, seen in some regions as a feat or even sinful. You eat mostly with your fingers, and your knife using 3 fingers, only not the whole hand, as that would be uncouth. You tear bread, dip it in sauce, and use your thumb and forefinger to lift morsels to your lips daintily, without dripping. Then comes the first course, perhaps a golden poultry pie, steam escaping from its sugared crust. You wait. No matter how good it smells, you do not begin eating until the highest-ranking person at the table has taken their first bite. To jump ahead would be a scandal. The second course might include a cold roast of swan or boar surrounded by aspic and decorative herbs. You admire it, compliment the host with a murmur, and then serve yourself only what's closest to you. Reaching too far across the table would be vulgar. You sip wine watered down as custom demands and never gulp. You nod politely to the servant who refills your goblet. You do not raise your voice. Laughter must be gentle conversation, respectful. The rich do not slouch, belch, or talk with their mouths full. Even complaints must be delicate. A furrowed brow, a word to a servant, not a public scene. The next course arrives, maybe a spiced fruit compote, or a small round of marzipan, sculpted into the shape of a hedgehog, or castle-rich households often played with food presentation. You admire but do not gawk. Excessive excitement would imply you're unaccustomed to such treats. The noble way is to behave as though you've had 100 sculpted hedgehogs before. You notice the salt cellar, a large, elaborate vessel placed near the head of the table. Its location silently signals the division between high and low status at the meal. You're seated just below the salt. Not an insult, but a reminder of your place. And then the small gestures you hadn't noticed before begin to reveal themselves. A lady dabs the corner of her mouth with a folded napkin, never wiping. A young noble carefully removes a bone from his mouth and places it on the edge of his trencher, not the tablecloth. Someone drops a morsel and immediately covers it with their hand until a servant retrieves it. Shame is subtle, but it stings. Dessert is served. Not a towering cake, but perhaps comfits sugar-coated seeds meant to aid digestion, or candied violets served on a silver tray. You take a few, never too many. Gluttony is not the noble sin, it's the peasant's vice. As the meal winds down, a servant approaches with a basin and towel. You wash your hands again, signaling the end. Then you rise only when the host does and bow your head in thanks. You've passed a test you didn't know you were taking. And tonight, you didn't just eat like the rich. You dined as one. But now as night thickens and torches hiss against damp stone, we'll peel back another layer of noble indulgence. Next, we'll step into the banquet after the banquet, the world of late-night feasting, drinking, and music. A realm where rules soften, shadows grow longer, and true decadence quietly emerges. For now, lean back. Let the last taste of sugared almonds linger on your tongue. And remember, in the world of the elite, eating is never just eating. It is identity, performance, and power served warm. The candles have burned lower now. The official meal is over. But if you thought the night ended with hand-washing and polite nods, you haven't yet seen the banquet. After the banquet, a quieter, more intimate affair, where the richest reveal just how rich they are. You follow the host and a select group of guests down a hallway, lit by flickering torches. The air grows warmer again, tinged with spices, wine, and something sweet. The room you enter is smaller than the great hall, cozier, cushioned with tapestries and pillows. This is the solar, or perhaps the private dining room reserved only for the inner circle. Here formality loosens. No one sits in strict ranks now. The chairs are lower, the benches scattered. The lord might even remove his outer tunic. The lady may allow her veil to slip just a little. Music plays lutes, soft drums, a gentle harp. And in the corner, servants roll in trays of glittering sweets, jewel-like confections, and rare, expensive fruits. This is where the true treasures of a noble pantry are unveiled. A marchpane castle built from almond paste and sugar takes center stage, its turrets glazed with rosewater, its windows inset with candied orange peel. Guests admire it with polite murmurs, knowing that a single bite costs more than a commoner's week of meals. There are dried figs from the Mediterranean stuffed with spiced nuts, sugared dates glistening like amber, quince jelly molded into flowers. You sample one and it melts on your tongue, tart and floral, chased by a sip of Hippocras, a spiced red wine gently warmed and scented with cinnamon, ginger, and clove. Unlike dinner, this is pure indulgence. You're no longer eating for sustenance or health or even status. You're eating for pleasure. Every item on the table is a symbol of trade connections, of cultural refinement, of how far your household can reach beyond your own borders. Take the sugar, for instance. You see it dusted over candied violets, rolled into snowballs of almond flour, shaped into delicate sculptures of birds and beasts. But you also see what it means. Sugar in the medieval world is rare, costly, and imported. It's not a pantry staple. It's a status symbol, and its presence says we are rich enough to sweeten the world. Nearby, a small clay dish holds ambergris, a strange and fragrant substance from the sea used to flavor sweets and perfumes. A drop is added to wine and its aroma drifts through the room, strange, musky, intoxicating. No one questions it. They nod knowingly. Only the wealthiest even know what it is. Then someone brings in cheese, not for hunger, but as a digestif. A slice of hard-used milk cheese may be paired with honeycomb or spiced pear paste. You bite, and the salt and sweet dance across your tongue, chased by the warmth of a final wine. Laughter begins to rise, now low and relaxed. One guest recites a line of court poetry. Another sings a bawdy verse. A noblewoman plays a short piece on the harp, and everyone claps. The host smiles content. This is no longer ceremony. This is control yielding to comfort, the transition from duty to desire. And even as you enjoy it, you begin to understand something deeper. This late-night feast is not just the dessert of the day, it's the dessert of power. This is where the richest reinforce bonds. where alliances are hinted at, marriages softly suggested, old wounds quietly soothed with shared sweetmeats and drink. No contracts are signed here. But tomorrow, when decisions are made, the people in this room who shared this marzipan and mulled wine will remember each other fondly. And when the plates are finally cleared, the guests rise slowly. Not in stiff formality, but in drowsy warmth. They touch shoulders. They offer soft goodbyes. Someone plucks one last sugared almond from a tray and pockets it for later. You linger a moment longer. The coals burn low. The scent of clove and quince still hovers in the air. In the next chapter, we'll peek into the seasonal rhythms of noble food. The way menus changed with the calendar. How feast days exploded with decadence, and why some of the grandest meals happened not in summer, but in the coldest depths of winter. But for now, breathe deep. You've tasted sweetness older than sugar, and shared wine older than friendship. Tonight you dined like royalty after hours, and that might be the most decadent meal of all. The night fades, but the calendar turns. As you open your eyes again, still tucked in the folds of the noble world, you find yourself standing at the edge of a seasonal transformation. Because in the medieval world, what the rich eat is not simply a matter of wealth, it's a matter of when. You're in the same grand kitchen, but everything has shifted. The baskets now hold root vegetables, not soft fruits. The barrels brim with salted fish, not fresh meat. You smell sage and preserved quince, not strawberries or mint. The servants talk of Lent, of Michaelmas, of Yule feasts. The food changes with the church calendar, the agricultural cycle, and the seasons of hunger and abundance. Let's begin in spring, a time of hope, but also lean cupboards. Winter's preserves have dwindled. Fresh greens are only beginning to appear. But if you're wealthy, you can feast on forced vegetables from heated frames, early herbs, and the last of your salted venison from the winter hunts. Easter approaches, so the church allows meat again, and noble tables groan with roasted lamb, bright green peas, and eggs dyed with saffron or onion skin. It's a time for celebration, especially after Lent's 40-day fast. Now it's summer, a season of abundance. The fields are green, and your table shows it. Rich households enjoy a rainbow of berries, cherries, and stone fruits plucked from their own orchards or rushed in from afar. Fish is fresh. Game is plentiful. You dine under open windows with cold dishes served beside chilled wine. Rich stews take a back seat to light custards, rosewater jellies, and fresh cheeses. Even the bread is lighter, made with fresh ground flour and honey. Then, with the first golden chill, comes autumn. This is the season of slaughter and stockpiling. The noble kitchen becomes a machine again, preserving, curing, drying. You see pigs slaughtered for hams, apples stewed into jam, mushrooms laid out to dry. There are more roasts, more gravies, more pies stuffed with pigeon pear or eel. Harvest festivals take place, and the wealthy host epic feasts, sometimes extending for days. You may eat baked venison, hazelnut pudding, or boar with blackberry sauce. And always spices, because they keep things vibrant even as the world begins to brown and fade. And then, winter. The test of any noble house. It's cold. It's dark. But for the rich, it's also a time to shine. Because if you can serve cherries in January, swan roasted over applewood, or sugar sculptures shaped like mythical beasts, then your guests know you have conquered the season. Winter brings the most elaborate feasts of all, especially at Christmas and Twelfth Night. Tables are set with gold. Wine flows freely. You might be served a cockatrice, a mythical-looking creature made by sewing together parts of piglet and poultry roasted whole. Or frumenty, a thick wheat porridge enriched with saffron and cream. The Yule boar's head arrives with fruit in its jaws, flanked by song and spectacle. Servants parade it through the hall as the lords raise their goblets. And yet even in winter's bounty, you feel the undercurrent of planning. The nuts, the smoked meats, the aged cheese, all of it was prepared months ago. Because wealth isn't about spending. It's about preparing, controlling, surviving with style. Rich people don't simply eat through the seasons. They anticipate them. A midsummer pie might contain a reminder of spring. A Christmas table might hint at summer's lost peaches hidden in syrup. This manipulation of the calendar, this defiance of nature, is the luxury that defines noble dining. Even fasting has its own wealth-coded version. During Lent, the poor abstain from meat out of necessity. But the rich, they transform fish into art. They eat eel pies, almond milk stews, and desserts shaped to look like forbidden foods, because even abstinence becomes a performance. Soon we'll step even deeper into this strange paradox, where extravagance meets religious restraint, where fasting days become just another excuse to show off. But for now, let your breath slow. You've walked the full year in flavors. And now you know in the medieval world, the calendar doesn't just tell time, it dictates taste. By now, you've seen noble food in all its seasonal glory, lush summer fruits, syruped winter meats, marzipan dragons. But there's another thread running through the medieval dining experience that we haven't yet tugged on religion. And it's not optional. You blink and it's Friday, which means no meat. Not because there's none available, your cellar is full of it, but because the church has spoken. Fish replaces flesh. Eggs, cheese, and milk may be restricted too, depending on the occasion. And yet the rich do not simply accept these restrictions. They find clever, even delicious ways to work around them. Tonight's menu, for example, a grand Lenten feast, every dish designed to impress, while still technically obeying the rules. The first course is a mock roast goose shaped from fish paste, glazed in beet juice and cooked to mimic poultry skin. Next comes a soup of almond milk rich with rice, ginger, and saffron, so thick and creamy it makes you forget you're fasting. Then delicately fried eel pies, their bones picked clean and layered with sweet onions and herbs. This is where medieval cuisine starts to feel like a performance art, especially in noble households. The more elaborate the fast, the more it becomes a challenge to showcase invention, wealth, and piety all at once. No butter. Use imported oil. No meat. Mold fish to look like meat. You realize quickly that in the kitchens of the wealthy, fasting isn't a limit. It's a creative prompt. In the most extravagant courts, like that of the Pope or French royalty, the illusion becomes breathtaking. One chronicler describes a Lenten banquet where pears were carved from pressed fish, then poached and sugared to look exactly like the real fruit. Elsewhere, you might encounter pastries filled with figs and honey meant to satisfy sweet cravings without dairy, or scented jellies shaped into religious symbols laid out like edible prayers. But beyond the food itself, you feel the rhythm of devotion pulsing through the household. The mealtime begins with grace. A chaplain might say a blessing. A psalm might be sung. Every course is a reminder that pleasure must be balanced by penitence, or at least the appearance of it. And yet contradictions are everywhere. The nobility might claim abstinence, but the amount of effort and expense behind their fasting meals rivals their regular feasts. That poached sturgeon cost more than a roast ox. That almond milk soup required a merchant's trip across 3 towns. And those imported spices for the saffron rice, a gift from a foreign dignitary. It's religious, yes, but it's also economic theater. Still, it's not all performance. Some nobles truly believe in the sacred rhythms that define their eating. They fast on appointed days. They give up rich foods during Advent. They donate leftover bread to the poor or invite monks to dine in their halls. Food in this sense becomes a way to connect to the divine, to display humility even when cloaked in luxury. And speaking of charity, you've begun to notice another pattern at the edge of every meal: what happens afterward. In the wealthiest homes, it is custom to distribute leftovers carefully and symbolically. The remains of trenchers, untouched sweets, or roasted bones may be passed to waiting servants, villagers, or monasteries. Not always out of kindness, sometimes out of obligation or vanity, but it still creates a system where the rich feed the poor in their own indirect way. You watch a line of villagers at the gate, each receiving a hunk of bread or ladle of stew, and you wonder, do they taste the saffron, the cinnamon, the layered complexity, or do they just taste warmth on a cold day? In the next chapter, we'll leave the noble halls behind just for a moment and peer into the lives of the cooks, the servants, and the laborers who make all this opulence possible. Because behind every gilded table is a back room, a hot oven, a tired pair of hands. But for now, let the aroma of ginger and fish fade from your memory. Let the soft chant of grace echo into stillness. Because in the medieval world of the rich, even denial tastes expensive. Now finally we pass through the last door, the one behind the kitchen, down the steps, through the smoke, past the shelves of pickled onions and wheels of hard cheese. Because behind every noble feast, every sugared fig, every jeweled roast and spiced stew, there is a team, not of knights, not of courtiers, but of cooks. And if you want to understand what rich people truly ate in medieval times, you have to stand in their shoes, feel the heat of their fires, and smell the layers of labor clinging to every dish. The kitchen is a world apart. Here you step into a space humming with urgency. The floors are hard-packed earth, sometimes strewn with rushes to soak up spills. Fires roar from great hearths. Cauldrons bubble. Knives glint in the flickering light. And everywhere people move quick, quiet, relentless. You meet the master cook first. He's not a humble man. He can't afford to be. His job is part chef, part architect, part military commander. He oversees the menu, the timing, the flavors. One mistake could insult a duke or worse, embarrass the household. Around him, scullions scrub pots with ashes and sand. Spit boys crank the massive turning rods that hold whole carcasses. Pastry cooks mix dough by hand, pressing it into elaborate molds. The air is thick with grease-ash herbs and sweat. And unlike modern chefs, these workers aren't always tasting the food they make. Spices are too precious, meat too expensive. Much of what's served to the Lord the cook has never truly savored himself. Still, the knowledge is deep. You watch as one cook crushes mustard seed with wine and vinegar, crafting a sauce that will cut through the richness of roasted peacock. Another tends to a simmering pot of pottage meat, barley, saffron, raisins, measured not by written recipe, but by instinct, passed down from kitchen to kitchen. Everything here is built to scale. A noble feast might require dozens of dishes served at once. There is no modern concept of starter, main, dessert. Instead, courses arrive in waves with dishes arranged not by appetite but by color, texture, and symbolism. A yellow custard beside a black pudding. A white almond jelly next to a red spiced chicken. The variety is deliberate, designed to impress and overwhelm. And while the lords above debate politics, flirt, or show off their manners, the cooks down here are performing a far more dangerous balancing act, making miracles out of supply shortages, unpredictable fires, and fickle, noble preferences. If a dish goes cold, the whole illusion collapses. If the bread is too hard, the steward hears about it. And if the wine isn't warmed just right, the cellar master may bear the blame, but the cook always feels the heat. You spot the herb mistress quietly tending to bundles of sage rosemary and thyme wrapped in cloth and hung to dry. Her fingers move with the tenderness of someone handling treasure. And in a way she is. Because these herbs, these roots, these powders from distant lands, their flavor and status, currency, and alchemy. Then there's the butler managing the wine and the pantler responsible for bread. Each has their own domain, their own secrets. The pantler knows exactly how much flour to reserve in case of a surprise guest. The butler can calculate to the goblet how much claret will last through the night. It's a hierarchy that mirrors the nobility itself, tightly controlled, fiercely protected. Even the waste tells a story. You glance at a pile of offcuts and bones and know that none of it will be truly wasted. The dogs will feast well tonight. The poorest servants will scrape the bones clean. The leftover trenchers may feed a nearby monastery. It's not generosity, it's economy and image. A noble house must appear bountiful but never wasteful. And finally, just before the end, you step outside to the back courtyard where a lone cook is stirring a pot over open flame. It's for tomorrow a meat jelly that needs to cool overnight, molded into shapes for a midday meal. He doesn't see you. He just works slow and steady, humming something low under his breath. A lullaby, maybe. And in that moment you realize the true flavor of noble food isn't in the saffron or the roast swan or the marzipan. It's in labor. The long hours, the burns, the planning, the fear of failure and the pride of success. The cook who crafts a dish he won't eat. The servant who presents it with a bowed head. The noble who accepts it with a nod. Every bite a transaction. Every feast a performance. And now that you've seen it all, from the lavish halls to the smoky kitchens, your own breath begins to slow. Your own body begins to relax. Because tonight, you didn't just learn what rich people ate in medieval times. You lived it. And with that, let's wind it all down gently together. And now your seat is empty. The goblets are drained. The dishes cleared. The fire in the great hall has settled into a quiet orange glow. All that remains is warmth, memory, and the hush that follows a long, full evening. You've walked through kitchens and corridors. You've tasted roast peacock, sugared violets, and fish molded to look like fruit. You've seen the power behind the plate and the labor behind the luxury. And now, in this stillness, you carry it all with you, not the flavors, not the gold, but the quiet truth that behind every indulgent feast is a world of care, control, and craft. Your breath has slowed. Your limbs are heavy beneath imagined linen and velvet. You can almost feel the echo of harp strings still ringing faintly from a distant room. Outside, the air is cold, but inside, under your blanket or tucked into your pillow, everything is soft, slow, and silent. Let go of the details. Let the spice jars fade. Let the trenchers crumble. Let the echoes of courtly laughter melt into the silence. No more lords, no more menus, no more firewood to stack or goblets to refill. Just this moment. Just this breath. You're no longer a guest in the great hall. You're drifting now past the edge of waking into the foggy glow where dreams live. Maybe you'll wander the kitchens one more time. Maybe you'll walk with the spice caravan. Maybe you'll sleep deeply and long, like a noble with no duties left. Because tonight, you didn't just listen to history. You tasted it. You wore it. You worked it. And now you've laid it gently to rest.